So, The Divine Invasion by Philip K. Dick. This is the second book in his Valis trilogy, and I was really interested to see how he could possibly make a sequel to Valis. Well, he doesn't really make a sequel in the sense that elements of the first book find a progression and new depth is given to the overall story. This is more like a reshaping of the core ideas that were expounded in Valis, giving the ideas a new form. You could think of the Divine Invasion's events as happening at the same time as Valis's, except set like 400 light years away. In the Divine Invasion, we still have the same concepts floating around that we had in Valis, namely, a Judeo-Christian Gnostic cataclysm brewing, a fight between good and evil, the Earth being shrouded in a dystopia that keeps people asleep to the real world. All this is here in the Divine Invasion. But unlike Valis, this book, to me, feels a lot more sci-fi and less human. The book is about God, or Yahweh, as he creates his own way to reach Earth to penetrate a zone of evil after being banished from there. He kind of self-fulfills his own prophecy by impregnating a woman named Ribis with himself, and then gives her and someone named Asher the divine command to reach Earth again, so that I guess he can dispel evil. I don't know, even after reading this whole thing, the end goal is really nebulous. I even think that wondering about what is really happening in this book is kind of missing the point a little bit. It's all very convoluted because the story is set in some kind of cosmic repetition of eternal cycles. Yahweh knows he's gonna make it, just like he knew he was once gonna get banished. It's kind of like he's going through the motions, and while this might easily be how the universe really works, as a book it's kind of tedious. The book was a little bit more focused on this plot than it was about PKD's reflections of the universe, which is the core of Alice. This makes it feel a lot less human to me. For most of the book, I was a bit bored. I think that when we're just presented with this very expansive theory of the ultimate nature of the universe, it gets a little too heavy. Not in the sense that I can't fathom it, but more in the sense that I'm not about to look up all of these religious references that are constantly being thrown at me in roundabout ways. This book felt a lot less fun to read than Valis for this reason. But there were things I liked that were dispersed in certain areas of this book. I saw a clear connection to Jungian psychology in the way his character Asher and his godlike counterpart Emmanuel, which is also his son, eventually found their animas. The anima in Jungian psychology refers to the inner feminine that exists in a man's psyche, which you can choose to listen to or to hate, etc. Women have the same thing, and for them it's called the animus. The characterization of these is something that's worth looking into if you have a spare moment. Anyway, in Divine Invasion, Emmanuel, aka God, meets a girl named Xena. Although they're both children in the book, they're kind of just taking on this form in this one particular realm, etc., etc. Basically, Xena helps Emmanuel in the form of a guide, and Emmanuel keeps trying to figure out who she is. And in the end, he finds out that she's actually a part of him, and that they're the same person. This can be seen as PKD basically finding his own anima in his psyche and reconciling it with himself. Another Jungian theme that kept reappearing was the unconscious and its control over us. Jung talks about how there's an unconscious part of our minds, and in a sense, it has more control of us than we know. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I want to say about this that the point of the unconscious isn't that it controls us ruthlessly. It's more that there's an interplay between what we're conscious of and the things that we're not conscious of at the moment. And these two realms mix to form our behaviors. There is a way to work with the unconscious instead of running away from it, because running away from it will not result in anything. But going back to the novel, PKD's world is sort of centered around this idea that there is something controlling people, but no one knows what it is, but it seems evil. This would be an example of not working with the unconscious. In the book, PKD involves government figures and policemen as representations of this controlling evil. It wouldn't be a PKD novel without them, honestly. But what I found interesting this time was that in the Divine Invasion, these authority figures didn't seem to exist in their brutally repressive form that we normally find in dystopian novels. Instead, the main characters had a sort of colloquy with the authority figures on a level playing field. They would sort of boss the government figures and the policemen around as much as they bossed the characters around. Especially during a scene at the end of chapter 18, which is my favorite scene in the book, where a cop stops Herb Asher and proceeds to have a full-blown, deep conversation about what's been going through his head. The cop calls him crazy, but he at least listened and partook in the conversation. Not to mention Herb Asher was the one who held the cop's gun to the cop. The roles of authority are sort of watered down. The people who are normally supposed to be controlling us as one representation of the unconscious become just like us. I see this as a symbol for a reconciliation between the conscious and the unconscious mind, where one finally opens up a pathway between them for communication, instead of a complete repression, just as there was a reconciliation with the anima earlier. The Valis trilogy is the last set of books that PKD completed before his death, and I think this is definitely worth noting because you can sort of see this fact tinging the works with their subject matter, but also with the ways in which PKD comes to terms with a lot of things in his life. So anyway, I'll be getting to the last book of the Valis trilogy at some point. I don't know what the next book I'm going to review is, but I'm going to try and review it before my classes start again at the end of August.